Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back in to bring you Healing Heroic Tomb Part 1. The first 4 bosses of Tomb, everything you need to know about healing up those bosses and conquering the instance, alright? Getting into it, we have Rogo Roth. This is a pretty simple encounter, pretty easy to get a handle on. You know, periodically you are going to be having a bunch of pillars spawning out of the ground. Your job here is to be utilizing just the right mechanics to be keeping up pillars that are necessary, as well as breaking them when you have to, alright? Starting off, you will get crashing comets periodically that'll be targeting different members of the team, and these will have a comet land on the player as well as anybody surrounding the player, and it will also break pillars. You don't want to break any pillars. Make sure you're moving away from players. Make sure you're moving away from pillars. It'll deal a dot to you or to whoever it's targeting. Make sure you're keeping an eye on them, keeping them topped off. From there, again, with the pillars constantly spawning here, you are going to get a shattering star that's going to target one player. The damage when that star reaches the player, huge raid-wide burst. It'll deal less damage if there's more pillars that are soaked up by this comet. So ideally, get the shattering star on you. You want to run through, 1 or 2 pillars, and you should be just fine. It'll break those pillars. You don't want to break every single pillar possible, of course, because for the Infernal Burning, which is the one-shot mechanic from the boss, he will destroy those pillars, and he will destroy you if you are not standing behind those pillars. So stand behind the pillars, avoid his burst. He will then shatter all the pillars, and then the fight starts over. Keep an eye on the people who are debuffed. Make sure you're tracking the debuffs. Make sure you're not getting out of range of the tanks, because it's very easy to get out of range of them on this fight. You will kind of have a ping pong of running behind the pillars, then running back close enough to melee that you're not kind of sitting in there. So your comets, if they do target you, are not going to be hitting melee. But you do want to be able to be in range of the tanks in case of the melted armor, which can deal lots and lots of damage to the tank. So keep an eye on that. Moving on to Demonic Inquisition, you have 2 bosses here over the course of the fight. You have Harjatan, which is the big beefy guy with the big sword and axe. And you have Belloc, which is basically the Inquisitor demon. That'll just be standing there and it'll be just chain casting the entirety of the fight. It can't be moved. For this fight, you're going to have a torment bar. This bar is going to fill up the more that you stand in void zones or that you are dealing with certain mechanics. It will continue to fill up your bar when you reach full power on the bar. Then you're basically doing no damage, no healing, no nothing. And you need to confess, which is using your extra action button. You go down into the zone. You are fighting this big Shah-like demon mob, and you are picking up nice little shiny balls to get out again. It's kind of a back and forth, back and forth. You're trying to be down there as little as possible, but when you get down there, using any kind of movement speed increases, getting the balls as fast as you possibly can, getting back up. It's very, very important for healers to be getting in and out very, very quickly, because the damage can ramp up quite a bit over the course of the fight as more people are going down, and there's more interrupts from Belloc, for example, that are being missed. The more damage that kind of just gets put on everybody in the group. So big thing, the DPS is going to be switching off and on between Harjatan and Belloc, depending on what they're doing. Harjatan will have a Bone Saw, which is him just having this huge AoE whirlwind effect that's going to be going out. You also cannot damage him because you will be taking more torment. So ideally, he's going to be away from the group. You're not going to be damaging him. So if you're playing Disc, you definitely don't want to be damaging Harjatan when his Bone Saw is going off. And similarly, Belloc, at a later point, will have a Fell Squall. And this Fell Squall will basically mean that you do not want to hit him, and you want to switch targets to Harjatan. Hitting either Harjatan or Belloc during their special ability will basically be giving you more and more torment. If you have an ability like Penance, for example, every single tick, Penance is giving you more and more torment. So as a Disc Priest, be very, very careful there. As a healer in general, you shouldn't have to worry about it, those abilities too much, except for the damage that's going to be dealt to any players that are too close or nearby. The idea here is that you're going to be interrupting, if your class does have one, of the Pangs of Guilt that are going out. Ideally you want to be having your range, having an interrupt order for that, but it's very, very likely that that's going to be one of the mechanics that's going to be dealing the most damage to your group. Do what you can to be getting your dispels out as rapidly as possible. These Echoing Anguishes will deal quite a bit of torment to the players who have the debuff on them, but it will also deal a lot if they're dispelled in the middle of the group. So this is going to be, a small AoE radius that you just need to get everybody away from. Usually what my group did is we just had a dispel order, or we just had a countdown, quick 1, 2, 3 dispel, 1, 2, 3 dispel, and everyone in the group knew, okay, the second I have this, get out of the group, get dispelled, and you're good to go. If you get it on yourself, run away, dispel yourself as soon as you possibly can, because as that dot is on you, it's dealing torment to you. Dispelling it will also give you more torment. So ideally, get away from everybody else, dispel, and you're good to go. Over the course of the fight, there will be just a number of void zones to watch out for. Again, these are just going to be dealing more torment, more damage to you. Try to have a decent spread against other players. You don't want to be stacked up too much, because again, more and more void zones are going to be going on you. Watch your feet, keep an eye on your dispels, Coordinate with your other healers for those dispels, and ideally be using your raid CDs when the interrupt order kind of gets a little bit out of control, or when the big damage is going out from like a Fell Squall or something like that. There's not really a bad time to use a raid cooldown, as long as you're keeping everyone safe and as long as you're not overlapping your raid CDs here. It can get very much out of hand quite quickly just from the regular damage of the fight and having some players up and some players down. So definitely keep an eye on that and try to coordinate with your other healers so that not all the healers are down at the same time. Moving on to Heroic Harjatan, or Harjatan. I like Harjatan. For this fight, pretty simple overall. You're going to be stacking behind the boss more often than not, and you're going to be watching his power bar just about as intently as you possibly can. So whenever his power bar starts building up, you're going to be getting the unchecked rage, which is just a frontal cleave that is splitting the damage based on how many people are stacking in it. So you definitely want to be in it, and you want to have everybody in it whenever you can. Periodically throughout the fight, this energy bar will switch into the Frosty Discharge, and this is going to be dealing a lot of the damage that's going to be more magic based. And as you're getting more and more stacks of Drenched is a debuff that's given to you by a number of different mechanics. There's the cast from the boss that can be interrupted. There are going to be periodic Murlocs that are spawned that need to be killed that can apply Drench to you, and they will also be applying the Aqueous Burst to a number of different players. This is just going to cause them to spawn a Void Zone. Standing in this Void Zone gives you more Drench stacks. So really watching Void Zones as best as you can, staying away from the adds, but also making sure that they're all going to be clumped together in melees. They can be all cleaved down and killed really quickly is definitely going to be very vital. If any of the Murlocs are fixated on you or focused on you, try to push them through melee, but try not to sit in melee at that point, you know. As a healer, you'll kind of bounce in and out of melee as these adds are coming out and as the unchecked rages are coming out. So you're still able to split the damage, but you don't want to be standing in any of the void zones that are going out. Periodically, he will draw in, which is going to draw in all of the void zones that are giving you drench stacks. Think Nithendra in the Emerald Nightmare. It's going to be very, very similar to that. Just watch your feet, watch where all these void zones are coming from, make sure you're getting out of their way, then you're able to get stacked up again as the unchecked rages start going out. Overall, it's a pretty simple fight. There will be, you know, fairly middle amount of damage that's going out. You do want to make sure that you're using your mana as best as you can because the fight is pretty quick. Keep an eye on using your raid CDs and things like that for the unchecked rages, or if any of the Frosty Discharges are dealing lots and lots of damage, or the whole raid has lots and lots of stacks. Don't be afraid to be very aggressive with your mana here. Fight shouldn't last too long. And finally, moving on to Sisters of the Moon. This fight looks like it has a ton of mechanics, and it sort of does, but it's actually not nearly as intimidating as it looks at first. Alright, so you're going to be having 3 different Night Elves that you're going to have to fight periodically, and they will kind of phase in and out and have different impacts on the group as the fight goes on. So basic gist of it is that the floor is going to periodically go from light to the side to dark side, light side, dark side, and keep on going from there. And it'll go from, as you're entering the room, it'll go from right to left periodically. You will gain stacks of the opposite debuff that'll need to be purged periodically by going to the other side of the moon. And you'll be doing this fairly periodically or just fairly naturally as the fight is just kind of going on. Basically, over the course of the fight, the room will constantly change between light and dark and light. What you have to be doing here is that you have to be periodically clearing your stacks when you need to, when you're targeted by specific mechanics. So, for example, being on the dark side of the moon, you are going to be taking more shadow damage until you clear your stacks. Being on the light side of the moon, you're going to be taking more arcane damage until you go to the shadow side, you clear stacks. Things like that. So if you're targeted by Rapid Shot, for example, you want to go to the light side of the moon, make sure that you're clearing any kind of stacks that you have of the shadow damage taken. So you're reducing your shadow damage there. If you're targeted by a Moonburn, you're going to be taking more arcane damage. So you want to be moving to the dark side of the moon so that you're not taking extra arcane damage there, right? And you're going to be switching off here and there and making sure that you're not taking too much damage there. There will be glaives that are going everywhere all over the course of this fight, and they're very, very annoying. Make sure you're watching out for the glaives as best as you can. A lot of times they can kind of be cutting through the middle of the room. So generally, as ranged, I try to stay on the edges of the room, the outer rim of the room as best as I can, so that I can still see everything that's going on, but I'm not going to be one of the first targets for the glaives that are going out. While you are still dealing with the Moonburns and the Rapid Shots, you also have to be dealing with the Incorporeal Shot. This is basically going to be a nice, big, thick arcane line that is traced between one of the Ghost Night Elves and a player. You basically have to stretch this line across generally all of melee, have everyone get into it to split the damage. This is just going to be, you know, a fairly light amount of damage is going to be going out. You just want to make sure that you're prepared for it as best as you can. And the more people, again, this is like Harjatan, the more people are standing in it, less damage goes out on everyone else. The final really big mechanic to kind of focus on as a healer is called Embrace of the Eclipse. This is when the priestess will put up an absorb shield on themselves and also absorb shields on everyone else, and this is going to absorb lots and lots of healing. This is when you really want to be recycling through your raid cooldowns, and as a healer, this is generally the big area that can wipe the whole raid. You know, you might lose people here and there to any of the glaives or rapid shot moonburns, things like that, but what will really deal a lot of damage to people is if these Embrace of the Eclipses are not healed up. If they are not healed up, they will be dealing lots and lots of damage to the targets that still have the debuffs on them. So you want to make sure that even if you're able to get everyone stacked up and you're able to Spirit Link to help remove some of the Embrace of the Eclipse, or you're just cycling through all your raid cooldowns periodically, you know, having him in one, Revival the other, and having your Pally or a Mastery with Mercy or something like that for the third one. Something like that, you're able to kind of get a cycle going, and you're able to constantly be healing up these debuffs and making sure that people aren't getting disproportionately affected. This is a really easy fight for stack healing, but you also have to make sure you're focusing on the people who are basically on the margins, who are not stacked up, because those people are not going to be receiving a lot of the AoE healing, and they're more likely to be killed. So keep an eye on that. If you have certain healing abilities, kind of like Prayer of Healing, which is based on proximity, you may want to be focusing more so on the ranged DPS players who are standing out, and less so on the melee players and using those proximity abilities on melee, because there's going to be Healing Rain, there's going to be Effervescence, all the different AoE healing, it's always going to be dropped onto melee. So usually they're going to be receiving the most healing to get the Eclipses healed up. Make sure that you're swapping in between Dark and Night as the mechanics are required, and making sure you're reducing any kind of damage that you're taking from any of the glaives that are going out. After that, really make sure that you're coordinating to heal up these Embrace of the Eclipses. You're tracking the debuffs on your raid frames to make sure that the second that goes out, you are either cycling through a raid cooldown or everyone's spamming their hearts out to make sure that these debuffs are getting cleared out. From there, should be an easy boss for you guys to kill. Just watch out for any kind of avoidable damage. Hope you guys enjoyed this quick run through for the first 4 heroic bosses. For the next video, I will be going through the next 4, and then I'll have one entirely devoted to Kil'jaeden. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know if you have any kind of quick questions or anything like that. Be sure to check out our Discord as well. I'm going to be having some mythic boss kills coming up very soon. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.